Yeah, thank you, and really nice to be here. And although we can't see any of you, so it feels a bit weird only seeing like Pontus and Carolina and Johan. But still, really nice to almost see you virtually. So we are Schibsted. I don't know how many of you that are familiar with Schibsted. We have a history of building large consumer brands, a media house, and we are here to talk about giving some insights into what our entrepreneurs and CEOs of the companies that we have in the portfolio have experienced when launching in different Nordic markets. And I at least often hear people refer to the Nordic markets as one market, which is not really true when hearing people speak in the different countries and when launching different services and seeing different effects of different things. So that is what we will focus on. I'm gonna see if I can, oh yeah, perfect. So with us, I work as an investment manager in the investment team. So Schibsted Growth is a part of Schibsted, and we are the investment arm of Schibsted. We will go more into that now in the beginning. And with me, I have Pontus.
Hi, everybody. I work closely together with Kaisa and meeting and trying to find the right startups for Schibsted to invest in, and been in Schibsted for over 20 years. So I sort of know the house. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, and we also have Carolina.
Hi everyone, good to almost see you here. I'm working for Prisjakt and been with Schibsted for 9 years now on different roles.
Yeah, and we have Johan as well.
Yes, hi guys, I'm Johan. I'm Swedish, but I'm the CEO of Lendo in Denmark. And I've been with Schibsted for about 2.5 years when I joined as the first employee in Lendo Denmark to start us up here. And I'm also a little bit involved in our launch in Spain. So I know a little bit about the expansion journey that Lendo is on that I will talk about later.
Yeah. So, sorry, I have a dog barking in my apartment. That's the sound. So we will start to give a quick intro to just the investment arm that Pontus and I work with before jumping into the Nordic insights. So first of all, as I mentioned, we work for the investment arm within Schibsted, and Schibsted has been investing in startup for almost 20 years. And one of the first investment was in Blocket. We have a finished version of Blocket called Tori that maybe some of you are familiar with as well. And as you can see, we have done more or less like 60 investments in the past 20 years. And right now we have more or less 20-ish companies in the portfolio, and most of them are quite early stage. We primarily do like A rounds-ish, so they're quite early stage. Yeah, and looking at the investment teams, what we primarily focus on, we have been spending obviously quite a lot of time on marketplaces since that's where it all started, with Blocket and Tori and so on. And then we have spent quite a lot of focus on financial services as well, where we have companies such as Lendo, Capsito, Rocker, and so on. And other than that, it's different kinds of like digital consumer services. We have an ed tech company, some health tech companies as well. And so these are like the main themes that we are currently focusing on. And in general, it's quite a lot of digital consumer services. Yeah, and feel free to type in any questions that you have in the Q&A, and we will and try to answer all of them in the session. Pontus, maybe you want to tell them about our like sweet spot investments.
Yeah, the sweet spot, as Kaisa said, it is like digital consumer services, B2C companies mostly. Like over 90% of our investment has been to business consumer companies. We try to invest when we see that the entrepreneur or the team has proven some things at least. So it's like late seed or A rounds. When we come in when it's more time to scale and grow the company. So ticket size are usually between 1 to 3 million euros, but that's the sort of the range, but somewhere in between there. We're in it for long term. We're different in some kind of way to some of the VCs that invest maybe 1 million euro, and when it's grown to 5 million, they sell their shares. We try to find companies that we can grow together on a long-term basis. So we're aiming to be like industrial, but we see how we work together. If there are strong synergies, and we like what we see in the startup, and the startup likes what they see in us as an investor. Our offer is usually a mixture, a combination of cash, of course. But some of the brands we meet need marketing, and we got a great reach in the Nordics, and we got some other benefits. You can click to the next page, Kajsa. Yeah, what do we mean with benefits? Well, it's like we get the Schibsted reach. I will go into that more. And we have a house of like, I think it's almost 40 brands in total, with a lot of experts within tech or SEO optimization and digital marketers, etc. And even we got a subscription team. We got almost 1 million subscribers now in Sweden and Norway. So we try to do competence sharing within those areas also. Strategic coaching, a lot of companies that started as a startup and now are international rollouts. Caroline and Johan will talk about 2 of those brands later. We do some networking, because we find when we go aside of the day-to-day business, we really try to focus on building business between the brands and try to encourage them to meet in other ways. We do a CEO conference when it's not Corona, twice a year, when we go somewhere. The image on the slide is from Tel Aviv 2 years ago, where we went to like be inspired and try to find new businesses with Israeli startups. We do marketing forums, we do subscription forums and stuff like that. We try to like be an active investor, trying to get the startup to meet to find new businesses. And of course, we have some brands that done a great internationalization. So we're supporting in expansion journeys. It's like Blocket's in more than 30 countries. Lendo is in, I think it's 6 or 7. Johan will go into that later. But we got some competences and benchmarks and some startups that really can help other startups. And that's our job, to get them work together. Next page, Kajsa. Yeah, talking about our reach, we got really strong reach in Norway and Sweden. I think the Swedish figure is that we meet 85% of the Swedish population every week. So it's a strong reach, and it's even stronger in Norway. It's almost 9 out of 10 people in Norway that we meet each week. We have tried, you can take the net, we have tried to build the same ecosystem in Finland right now. We're up to 6 persons out of 10 in Finland, with Tori, Oikotie, and Rakentaja that are marketplaces.
I don't know if you pronounced that correctly, Pontus.
No, probably not. Oikotie. But they are 3 marketplaces, and then we got Lendo and Hintaopas, super. There are brands from the venture portfolio from the start. And we see great opportunities in Finland, and to build what we built in Sweden and Norway also. And try to accelerate growth in startups. And we think startup can help us in the same way that startup has helped us in the other countries in the Nordics. And that's pretty much we are here today. So Kajsa.
Yeah, so as I said in the beginning, we have, like, when we meet startups, usually their plan after one Nordic country is to expand to another of like one of the other Nordic countries, because it's quite easy to replicate a product and a launch plan and so on to the other Nordic markets. However, as we have some companies that have experiences from launching in the different Nordic countries and other countries as well, we figured it would be better to bring them to this session, and where they can share their learnings in terms of differences and similarities and so on that they have seen when launching on the different Nordic markets and so on. So therefore we invited Johan and Carolina to join this session. So Johan from Lendo will start, and Johan, just tell me when I should switch slide.
Yeah, actually you're missing Denmark on that chart or that map you just showed on the previous slide. You need to work on that, I think, Kajsa.
Sorry.
No worries. You can move one step forward. So hi guys, I'm the CEO of Lendo in Denmark, as I mentioned before, and Lendo, just in very brief, is sort of the leading loan comparison website in the Nordic markets, and we're trying to become the leading service also in other Nordic markets outside of, or European markets outside of the Nordics rather. Maybe some of you are familiar with it in Finland, but just sort of a brief introduction is that we work to connect customers with banks. And the idea with Lendo is you make one application on our site and you get multiple offers from all the banks that we are collaborating with, and that it's a digital process end to end. So if you make an application now, about now you will start to receive offers, and then it could take longer as well. But first offers are coming within seconds basically, and it's personalized offers based on your data that you input and your own credit history and so forth. So it's quite different from affiliate sites and so forth you might be familiar with. And the example here is from Lendo in Spain, which we actually launched yesterday. The site went live yesterday, and we had 17 applications yesterday. So it's a very early start, but quite exciting. You can step one slide forward. Thank you. So these are sort of the areas that we at least try to excel at in Lendo, and I think we're doing it quite well, at least from time to time. So if we start with product development, we try to sort of maintain a very good user experience and sort of optimize the flow so that it's easy and smooth and fast for customers for applying for a loan. Generally, even though growing from through a broker like us is sort of an extra step in a lending process, given that the loan is afterwards sort of handled, paid out by bank, I think many customers still perceive taking a loan as easier doing it through Lendo, even though the process actually is longer, is because sort of the first impression and the fact that we're sort of gathering all the information and so forth in a quite sort of digital and a nice manner definitely helps that impressions. The other sort of area that we're working and spending a lot of time on is the partner integration. So we collaborate with a lot of different banks and lenders. I think in Finland it's around 30. And the better integrations we have towards them, obviously the faster it is for customers to start receiving loan offers and so forth, and the smoother the sort of customer journey is as well. So that's something we spend a lot of time and effort on. And the last area is more sort of marketing and acquiring customers, getting customers into our service so that we can pass them on to the banks. That's also something that we at least spend a lot of time and money on doing. And we are also, like, you're probably familiar with it, some of you at least from the Finnish market, that we're also like one of the bigger players on more traditional marketing, trying to be visible on TV and radio and outdoor and so forth to really be that sort of big brand when it comes to lending and especially like loan comparison. You can step forward. This is an overview of sort of our expansion journey. Lendo was started by, I think there was 3 entrepreneurs in Sweden in 2007. Then Schibsted went in after a few years and I think bought around half of Lendo. And then a few years later, or 1 or 2 years later, Schibsted bought sort of the rest. And the entrepreneurs, they stayed on until quite recently, I think until 3-4 years ago or something like that. The entrepreneurs were part of the management team in Sweden. And they went on to do another exciting venture called Bynk, and sort of rebranding itself as Rocker now in Sweden. And Schibsted is again sort of a lead investor in their new business. So here you have sort of nice examples of 3 entrepreneurs starting a company, growing it with Schibsted, exiting, and then taking another Schibsted and doing another company and doing it sort of over again, which I think also talks to sort of the longevity and the sort of the long-term focus of Schibsted, as Pontus talked about earlier. Anyways, Lendo, Schibsted went to Norway in 2012, then to Finland in 2015. We launched here in Denmark in sort of late 2018, or 2019 was when we had this sort of more commercial launch. In 2019, we also launched Poland and Austria. And yeah, as I mentioned yesterday, we launched Spain, which is of course sort of a very soft launch, but it's exciting to see how that goes. Should also mention here, graying out Poland, and that's because we exited Poland again this spring. And I think that's also sort of an important learning, that at least if you do a more sort of broad expansion journey over time, like we're doing in Lendo, then you're going to sort of have to count on having to close a market or 2 over time, which is of course a shame. But we try to work structured to avoid doing it, at least in later stages. But sometimes you just have to pull the plug. So that's something, not to sort of rain on anyone's parade, but that's something you need sort of to take with you as a calculated risk. Kajsa, you can step 1 forward. Thank you. So this is sort of just an overview of sort of our approach to expansion. And we've learned a lot over time. I think it was only in maybe 2018 that Lendo started to like really do expansion in a more structured way. Before that, it's been more sort of random, that like, let's test this in Norway, let's test this in Finland. And then after a few years with sort of great successes, at least in a few markets, Lendo and Schibsted decided to try to sort of expand Lendo broader to many more markets, to Denmark, but also to the countries outside of the Nordics that I showed before. And I think this is still work in progress, but this is sort of what we try to do now, that we start off with some sort of desk analysis. We have a team in Stockholm that analyze different markets, and sort of try to move towards a decision point where a market seems interesting enough to decide to move 1 step further. And then we go into some sort of build stage where it's more boots on the ground. We start meeting people, we start pitching Lendo to potential bank partners, we start maybe to build a product or at least scope the product, and we do sort of more in-depth analysis. And at this stage, we're also prepared to kill or to like not go further into the market if we feel that sort of our boxes are not ticked. And we've done this a few times. Like we invested resources and time into going sort of deep into a country and really understanding it, and deciding not to move forward with sort of the next step and launching. Even started to build a product in one of the markets. So that's, again, you should sometimes throw cold water into your face and sort of be realistic about, can this succeed or not? Next step is sort of the performance phase. This is the phase that Denmark was in through sort of during 2019. It's when we sort of proved that it can work here, that it's a market, that, you know, the competition is not too fierce. There's a good sort of product market fit, all these sort of things. Again, after this step, we are prepared to kill a country if needed. And we did that sort of with Poland. That was sort of in the performance phase. Maybe we would have stayed a little bit longer if it would have been from Corona, but maybe that would just have prolonged sort of the suffering. So who knows? And then we go into sort of a growth phase, which Lendo Denmark is in now, when we sort of try to accelerate. We invest more in marketing, we invest more in building a brand. We really try to sort of, take it to the next level and show that, we're here to stay, and this can be sort of a great sort of long-term long-term market. And then after that phase, we move into some sort of maturity state where you could say that sort of Lendo Sweden and Lendo Norway is in. Lendo Finland is actually sort of an interesting case because it's been sort of in mature phase, but we had a lot of challenges, and now we're sort of taking it back into more of a perform/growth phase where we're trying to sort of reprove that Lendo Finland can work and be successful. So that's something that you also maybe need to be prepared to do at least later in time. You can step forward, Kaisa. Thank you. So now I'm going to get quite practical. I'm going to sort of go into a number of examples. These are sort of some sort of important differences between countries that I'm going to try to highlight within different sort of areas that we focus. So we start with sort of the product market fit in a sense. Lendo in Sweden, as I talked about, Lendo was built in Sweden, as I talked about before, and Sweden, they have a UC, which is sort of a central credit register, which is very unique. It's sort of pretty much the only country in the world that has that type of infrastructure, which is great for a service like us because we can ask the customers to fill in like 5 different fields about themselves and then send the application with bank ID, and then they're done. Then they get offers and can get a loan. But in pretty much every other country where you don't have a central sort of credit database like in Sweden, you have to fill in more like 30, 35 different fields like you have to do in Denmark. So it's a very different customer experience. So that's something that I think Lendo has realized over time, and something that we sort of constantly remind ourselves of, because often we copy Sweden when we go to a new country, because Sweden is sort of the biggest and the best in the Lendo family. And we have to remind ourselves that it's very different from all the other markets in a sense. There is a question. Okay, so I'll save it for after presentation. Cool. So that's like one example of like the financial infrastructure being very different, and therefore we're going to have to adapt our product accordingly. In Norway, sort of unsecured loans are big, but not that big compared to the other markets. Instead, credit cards is really big in Norway. So that's something that we realized over time, that if we want to sort of be a sort of go-to place for lending in Norway, it's not enough that we sort of offer unsecured loans. We also need to sort of be in the credit card space, because that's how Norwegians are sort of lending money indirectly. Another difference, sort of Finland, when we entered sort of Norway, there were not that much competition or no competition at all. But in Finland, competition got fierce really fast. So it was like really hard competition from other brokers, from affiliate sites, from lenders. So like competition on especially like the marketing and sort of getting noticed space was really, really fierce in Denmark, in Finland, and it still is. So that's again sort of different dynamic that you learn over time. And then sort of a thing about Denmark, it's more from a sort of branding perspective, but as you probably know or have seen in previous slides, Lendo is sort of green. That's sort of our color. And we've been extremely consistent with that, especially like in markets like Sweden, to like brand ourselves as sort of the green company. Whilst when we went into Denmark, we quickly realized that a lot of payday lenders and sort of really sort of crappy competitors out there are using the color green. And there was so big mistrust in the sort of banking and lending space in Denmark, I think much higher than in most of the other Nordic markets, that we felt we needed to sort of distinguish ourselves from these sort of more low quality companies, if I'm allowed to call them that, at least from a market perception perspective. So we decided to not use the color green as sort of our brand color and product color, but instead use sort of a dark blue, because it signaled a more sort of serious, trustworthy image. And that was like really radical and really sort of controversial within Lendo. But we still did that. And I think it was a good decision, because we positioned it correctly from the start. And that's what can be sort of a very difficult decision to take. Like, should you deviate from a sort of global CVI? But sometimes it might make sense to do that. Kajsa, we can move on forward. So that was sort of some examples of product aspects that were very different in different markets and where we needed to adapt. On the partner side, sort of also very different. Although maybe at first glance, Santander is in all the markets, and we, you know, if we collaborate with Santander in Finland, in Sweden, in Norway, and we launch Denmark, it's of course natural to think, okay, we'll collaborate with Santander because they're also in the Danish market. But the fact of the matter is that even though it might, you know, open a first door or something like that, being a partner with Santander in other markets, it's pretty much only that, because in the actual market, like they're completely different, like IT setups, credit scores, decision structures. So like it's very limited what sort of we gain from you know, having a relationship with a partner in another market when we move into a new market. And this could of course be different depending on which bank we're talking about, or depending on, you know, which product you guys are working on. But it's just to say that don't take for granted that things will be exactly the same if you move into another market. Both from sort of more of a market infrastructure perspective, like I talked about on the previous slide with UC, but also with sort of your partners. If your product is sort of contingent on working with partners, sort of course, be optimistic and try to use sort of networks that you already have in Finland, for example, but also be sort of open and listen and sort of try to quickly figure out, you know, what are the similarities and what are the differences. Yes. Even Santander, like they used even different brands actually for brokers in Finland and Denmark. They use different brands than Santander. So like even from that perspective, it's different. Move forward. So the third aspect, more around the sort of acquiring of customers, cultures are very different as well. So I mean, it could be that L'Oreal and Coca-Cola, they can make an advertising campaign in France or in the US and use the same one in every country, used with different subtitles or, you know, with a dubbed speaker. But I think for other companies, it's just not that easy. I think what I sort of learned when I joined Lendo was that the sort of TV commercials and other type of traditional marketing that we use in, for example, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, very different. And they're targeting different sort of consumer behaviors. They're using different sort of cultural references. If they use humor can differ quite a lot between the Nordic countries, right? So in Norway, at least when we launched Denmark, they had this sort of quite weird commercial that were sort of focusing on refinancing of credit card debt. Refinancing is an important sort of sub-product to Lendo. And that, you know, that would never work in another country. Probably the humor wouldn't work, and also like the focus on the refinancing of credit card debt is completely off in all the other markets. In Sweden, they use these sort of monsters representing high or big interest rates for quite a while. And it works really well in Sweden. Could be that people, you know, don't think this is the best commercial, but it works. But would it work in Denmark? Probably not. You know, same story in Finland, same story in Denmark. We built an advertising campaign which is extremely successful in Denmark, but it's really based on sort of humor and irony. And if I show it to Sweden, they will think it's weird and depressing, but that's not how Danes sort of see it. So it's this sort of, you know, there are different culture references, humor is different, mentality is a bit different. So that's also something you need to take with you. Even if you don't, you know, start doing TV commercials, being mindful of the differences in culture is just really important. Step forward, please, Kajsa. And this sort of, just in extension of talking about cultures, this also goes for the corporate cultures. So I'm not going to insult any Finns. I'm not going to insult any Norwegians either. But I'm Swedish, so I can insult Swedes a little bit. And I can talk a little bit about Danes because I'm living here. But in Sweden, unless you know already, like there's really much sort of consensus culture in Sweden. So like if we talk internal meetings in Schibsted and Lendo, there's just, for me, coming from Denmark and working in a Danish perspective and, you know, becoming more and more Danish over time, I get frustrated sometimes when I'm in meetings with Swedes because, you know, it's very slow. There's so much consensus building. Everyone should get the voice heard. It's probably great, but coming from a Danish perspective, it's just different. And also in terms of meetings, like if you try to close a deal in Sweden, you probably need at least 3 meetings, because in the first meeting, you're going to get to know the people a little bit. In the second meeting, you're going to talk a bit more about your product. And maybe in the third meeting, you can maybe try to figure out if this is interesting or not to close a deal. I'm exaggerating a bit now, and sorry for the other Swedes in the meeting, but this is just to prove a point that it's a little bit more like that in Sweden, whilst in Denmark, it's a lot more to the point. You spend like 1 minute at the start of a meeting, getting to know each other, sort of basically stating your name. And then you start to talk about what you have to offer. And then you quickly figure out if it's interesting or not. And if it's not interesting, Danes sometimes just cut a meeting short because, this is a waste of time for everyone. Also, maybe exaggerating a little bit, but again, to prove the point, cultures can be quite different, and you have to be mindful about this, both from sort of a market perspective, but also from more of a, if you're seeking investment, if you're looking to sign a partnership agreement or whatever, be mindful about the cultural differences and be sort of open and listening, lyhörd, you would say in Swedish, around sort of signals and stuff. This is, I think, super important. Kajsa, last slide. I hope I'm not being sort of too sort of pessimistic or off-putting in terms of going into the different Nordic markets, because when all this is said and done, there are still a lot of similarities between the countries. You just need to not take every similarity for granted, and you need to sort of quickly find out or try to find out what is similar and what is different. And 2 things I want to sort of leave you with in general is that human psychology is in general very much the same. I think that goes for, across the Nordic countries, but also on a broader scale. So just example from Lendo, like even though our sort of TV marketing is very different in different countries, our more performance-driven marketing, how we set up Google campaigns, and these sort of things, when it's more like conversion focused and it's more about, sales psychology, human psychology, we can copy paste it in almost every market. We just have to translate the keywords and stuff. Because at least in my book, I think human psychology, when it comes to selling, these sort of things, it's very, very similar. Even those cultural references and so forth that we talked about before is different. And also digital, this goes without saying to you guys that work probably with digital projects, all of you, but I mean, the digital sort of infrastructure in general is the same or very much the same or very similar. Like devices are the same, cloud services are the same, protocols the same, developers speak, use the same languages. So if you have a digital product, it's probably going to be quite easy to use that product in different Nordic and other markets globally. You just have to be mindful about some of the things that I talked about earlier, that sort of local infrastructures can vary. So, lookup services, these sort of things, API connections might differ, even if some partners are the same. And again, it's like product adaptation. Is the product name the right one? The colors, the TV advertising and so forth. So maybe more things on the shell for the product market fit rather than everything underneath is what is important. So I'm happy to answer questions. And just in general, before I forget, I just want to say sort of best of luck to all of you guys with your different startups and projects. And if you have any sort of questions afterwards, something you want me to elaborate on, or you're looking to go into Denmark and you think there's an opportunity for collaboration or whatever, just feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or figuring out my email.
Yeah, we're going to provide Johan and Carolina's email in the end as well.
Nice.
We got some questions. Because they're pretty much about the differences between the markets. Maybe we should do the Carolina presentation first and then take it on a larger scale after.
Let's do that.
Perfect.
So we'll move over to Carolina and Prisjakt, and then we'll go for the Q&A. But continue to write questions in the Q&A. And in the chat. That's great. So Carolina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm Carolina, I'm the CMO of Prisjakt. We are the #1 price and product comparison site in the Nordics. We are big in Sweden and Norway, but you may know us as Hintop as in Finland. That think Pontus pronounced correctly. At least that's how I pronounce it as well. Shout out in the chat if that is the wrong pronunciation, and we try to fix that one. I'd like to start by taking you back to the year of 2002 and down in the basement of Jonas Bonde in a small town, Ängelholm in Sweden, because that's where it all started. He was annoyed that it was so hard for consumers to find the right product to the best price. And during his paternity leave, he started Prisjakt with a mission to give more power to the consumers and to make all prices available online and comparable. And the first years of Prisjakt was pretty slow and lonely, but soon Prisjakt made a friend in Min Hembio, a forum, my home theater. And at the same time, Frans Henel joined Prisjakt, and with him on board, the two entrepreneurs, together with a lot of feedback from this My Home Theater forum, started to pop new features faster than I microwave the popcorn. So a lot of things happened there, a lot of new user features. You can now compare, you can find similar products, you can save product in lists, read reviews from other users, and set up price alerts to be reminded about price drops in the future. So Prisjakt was growing, and since 2006, Prisjakt has been part of Schibsted, and with their support, we have accelerated growth. We are now 250 employees working at Prisjakt. We have expanded into new markets. We are currently in 7 markets. Besides the Nordics, it's UK, France, and New Zealand. And looking into the Nordic market specifically, in Sweden, we almost been around now for 2 decades. Norway is our 10-year-old, Finland our 5-year-old, and then the new kid in the family is Denmark. So speaking about the differences now, and I think we can switch to the next slide, or even the slide after that. And there are some differences between the Nordic markets, both when it comes to the e-commerce market and the maturity of the price comparison market. So looking into the e-commerce market, Sweden is the most mature market, with 70% of Swedes comparing every month. And that can be compared to the Finns, with only 50% comparing every month. Back in 2008, it was only 4% of Finns comparing every month, compared to 20 to 33% in the other Nordic countries. So Finns have been a bit late in the game there, but are catching up, and we see a strong growth in all the Nordic countries. Note that these numbers now are pre-COVID, so it's growing even quicker after that. So are there any differences between what they buy in the Nordics? Well, if you look on an overall level in the Nordics, on the category level, it is pretty similar. We see that Swedes tend to buy a bit more of clothes and beauty products, Norwegians a bit more of sport-related categories, but on an overall level, it's pretty much the same. You need to drill down into the specific products, into the brands, to really spot the differences. And on Prisjakt, we let millions of users with high purchase intent visit Prisjakt every month. And since our database is very well sorted, it's kind of easy to go into the insights tool to find these differences. And to give an example, we just left Black Week behind us now, and then we had more than 9.5 million clicks that we sent out to the stores. So millions of users have shown their interest and clicked on different products. And then we send all of this data into an insight database where it's product trends, stock status, it's the prices, and that we have an insight tool that guide the stores. It's important for stores to be able to have competitive prices. Prices are updated several times a day. It's important for them to spot the next fidget spinners to make sure that they have the right inventory in stock for each market. So that is an insight tool that not only is useful for the stores and for the B2B team, but I also say it's very useful for marketing team as well at Prisjakt and the PR team when speaking to journalists. And what other differences do we see? Well, I think we can take the next slide now. Not that that gives so much answers, it's more of a question. But to spin back a bit on what Johan said about the corporate cultures, I find that one interesting, and especially when you are in dialogue with the clients on different countries. And we have a Nordic sales team, clients present in all the Nordic countries, same but different partners, like Johan would have said. But in our case, it's more Elgiganten in Sweden, Elkjøp in Norway, and Gigantia in Finland, and so on. And we have country managers in each countries and sales rep to respond to the local needs, although it's a Nordic team per se. And some differences in behavior, and now I need to generalize here, and I hope that I don't offend anyone, but if I see Swedes, it seems like we are in general more happy to try out new things. While when we speak to the Finns, they really want the analysis, they want evidence, and they want the data that it really works beforehand. But once they try out either the service or we have a contract written, they tend to be very loyal to work with. If we look at the Finnish market, it also kind of differs a bit between the other Nordic markets. You have one very big player that many Finns are loyal to, Verkkokauppa, that I hope is almost the right pronunciation. And if we look at the other Nordic countries, it's more of a shopping around behavior and not one as dominant player as there is in Finland. Bouncing back to a bit of the reflection about the Danes and how we as Swedes can perceive it when we negotiate with Danes. I don't think we find it as easy as you, Johan. It seems like every time you think you have a contract with a Dane, they start to renegotiate all over again. So we think that we have a contract in place 4 times, but then they just laugh and they start all over again to negotiate. So there are definitely some cultural differences there as well. But we as Swedes, we are quite demanding as well in negotiations. We are not loyal and we have very high demands and we don't want to pay for it. We want a Tesla, but we want to pay for a Citroën. So that can also be kind of hard negotiations. Never satisfied, but an early adopter nations that is constantly chasing the next big thing to try. And this lack of loyalty and the long history of price comparison, I think results in Sweden being one of the most mature price comparison countries in the Nordics. It is almost 70% that compare every quarter in the Nordics. 1/4 of Swedes even compare every week. And if we look into Finland, then it's only 1/10 that compare every week. So there are definitely different maturity levels in the comparison markets that we need to take into account when we are creating the marketing strategies. But some things are the same. If we look at the most frequent price comparers, the first target group that we are growing, that tends to be the tech savvy, the main interested in home electronics. And that has been the same for all countries, and it's been the same sort of first core audience since Prisjakt were attracting users from the basement down in Ängelholm 2002. But in some markets, we are then growing and being saturated in this target group, and that's when we start to expand into other user cases and other segments. If we look into Finland specifically, that market is quite fragmented on the price comparison market. You have Verkka, and then you have so many Hintas already. It's a Hinta, it's Hinta Seuranta, and then it's Hinta Opa. So differentiating the service have been important towards the other players there to win, as well as educating the market, since it's quite immature when it comes to price comparison. Looking into the drivers of market, that also differs a bit. Lowest price is the main driver in most of the countries, while trust is standing out in Finland. If we look in Sweden, apart from price, we can see that product reviews from users and information about the footprint of the product is something that is growing a lot. So there are some things that that differs, I'd say, but I'd say there are more things that are similar than that differs. And we are acting as a global team, as a Nordic team. And then we see a lot of synergies. And I'd say some of the things that used to work in Sweden and Norway a couple of years ago are things that works in PR and in some of the marketing campaigns in the newer countries today. So there are definitely some synergies to learn from. So these were just some examples of how we adjust marketing depending on the local differences of the e-commerce and the comparison market, and then how the Prisjakt Insight tool can help companies to make sure that they have the right products and the right price in stock for each country to optimize on the different local trends.
Thank you, Carolina. We have loads of questions in the chat and the Q&A as well. So maybe we should just start by, because we have 10 minutes left, and I will direct the questions, and Pontus, you might see some from the chat as well. I see the Q&A ones, but we can start with the Q&A questions, and we'll see who of you that will be the one to answer them. So we have one question from an anonymous attendee asking, how about language? Is the common Scandinavian language a benefit when talking business? This is obviously excluding Finland and Iceland, but otherwise, is it beneficial to talk Scandinavian, assuming Scandinavian speakers are in the meeting too, during business meetings, or do you just talk English? And I think it might be relevant for you, Johan, to answer this one, because I know that Swedish and Danish is quite different.
Yeah, I can take this one. So, I mean, I think maybe first sort of more internally in Lendo and in Schibsted, I mean, I don't think that Lendo intended to find a Swedish country manager for Denmark, but they stumbled on me and it became me. And I had been living in Denmark for a number of years before that, and sort of speak and understand Danish well and understand the market quite well. And it has definitely not been a downside for me to be Swedish, navigating in sort of a very Swedish focus organization, like when it comes to especially Lendo, but also partially Schibsted. Because I mean, both sort of the cultural differences that I talked about before, but also language that I think that we can tell now, like we have sometimes meetings when there is Norwegian, Swedish, me from Denmark, and then some people from Finland. And when the people from Finland is not there, we speak, Scandinavian, Swedish, Norwegian-ish. And when people from Finland is there, we switch to English. And you can feel that the dynamic is just changing a little bit because people are maybe a little bit less comfortable when it's not their mother tongue. But having said that, like is it an obstacle? No, but I mean, it definitely helps. I mean, if it definitely helps to learn a little bit and to maybe be able to small talk in a local language and these sort of things. But I mean, English works really well. It just might take a little bit longer to get close to people, and a little bit tiny bit harder to break through maybe. But it depends on the people, the generation, these sort of things. Yeah. Hope that's an answer.
Thank you for that. And maybe then, Carolina, you can answer the next question. A question from Kimberly regarding when it comes to adapting the brand. Did you then work, and I guess, for you one as well, did you work with local creative agencies to help you craft a different message outlook? How have you guys handled that? Have you been working with local agencies and so on?
So we are a global marketing department that are having our global agencies when it comes to performance marketing, for instance. But we do have PR agencies locally in all countries that are helping out with the crafting the messages for the local markets. And we also have local country managers that make sure that the message is adapted. So not local creative agencies, but local PR agencies that help out with the insights and the messaging.
So for us, it's quite the opposite actually. So we work with local ad agencies. I think we might change approach slightly when we go into Spain, for example. But for Denmark, we did everything locally. We had a local ad agency. We didn't reuse any sort of TV, radio, marketing material. It was all sort of custom. Also because of the things that I talked about before, humor, culture references, and these sort of things. We even do all performance marketing and so forth in-house because it creates just more synergies. But we are a super marketing-driven business where most of our budget goes into marketing. So it makes sense maybe for us to do this, while for a different company that might work more with sort of PR, word of mouth, these sort of things, SEO, it might be very different. But yeah, we had a very local approach for all of it, basically.
Thank you.
And I probably need to correct myself there, because in Finland, actually, this year, we had a local creative agencies for radio and TV, but on our overall level, we haven't used so many local agencies.
Okay. Okay, so here's one question that I would like you guys to answer with like one word. So what has been the biggest obstacle when expanding to other Nordic markets? So one obstacle, and then one secret ingredient to succeed. So you will have to mention one obstacle when it comes to expanding to the Nordic countries, and then also one secret ingredient that you think is needed to succeed. And we can start with Carolina.
Thank you for that. So one obstacle that when launching.
Johan, if you're done with yours, you can start. So Carolina gets some time to think.
I think that one. The obstacles is definitely that it takes more time than you think always. So it takes initially time to get over the sort of first hurdle, to sort of collect the right insights and approach the marketing right way, which was not one word. Johan.
Yeah, so I think obstacle-wise, I think like also the sort of taking the time aspect, because we thought we would pretty quickly get 10, 15 banks in our partner panel, because there should be so many synergies between countries and so forth. So I think the sort of sometimes these things take time, and I think like the secret to success is probably just don't give up and like keep optimizing and keep pushing, because in the end you will break through, but it might take longer than you think.
Thank you. We have a question from to Pontus. Pontus, which of the Nordic markets is the easiest to work with for Schibsted, and why?
I think the things that comes to mind right away is that, of course, I work in the Swedish market most of my time, but it's a business consumer focus in the Swedish market makes it easier for Schibsted, I think, to find a quantity of companies that could fit in our portfolio. When we've been talking to, looking at the Finnish market, there is a more deep tech focused and more business to business focused. There might be synergies and might be, but it's like we have to think about it the extra time. So yeah, and the language is sometimes a problem.
Yeah. And then this is something we could actually ask Johan, as you have a planned launch in Spain now. When do you know you should go to Nordic markets over other European markets, as you've been like doing other European markets simultaneously as you've been doing Nordic markets?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it depends probably a lot about your sort of product market fit. I think in Denmark, I think maybe expectations were a little bit higher, or that it would be easier to go into Denmark compared to like Austria and Poland, that we launched almost simultaneously, because it's just closer to home, right? But yeah, I mean, as I talked a lot about in my presentation, I don't think you should necessarily take that for granted. So I think, I mean, if you're in if you're Finland and going to Sweden or Denmark is like, it's already maybe a language barrier, and there might be cultural differences that make it so that Finns are more similar to another European country than to Swedes or Danes. Then I mean, don't necessarily only look at the Nordics, look broader than that. But I mean, there's convenience in going to another Nordic country as well. So I don't know if that's an answer, but those are reflections at least.
Perfect, thank you. We are running out of time, and I don't know, Georgie, whether it will be, if it's possible to continue answer like with type answers to the remaining ones in the Q&A, or if they are lost once we close the session.
No, so they will not be recorded, but we can also answer them via message later on as well if we want. But up to you. Like, we could still answer one now, I think, and then we can give some quick. I'll close it very quickly after.
So we'll have then one final question, and that's the one with the most likes, and that's from Sachin, who asks, "What is the best country for an early stage startup to enter the North European market, and why?" So what is the best country, and do all companies need a 10+ year journey to cover many countries? So Carolina, maybe you can answer this one. Which country would you think is the best one for the early stage startup to enter the North European market, and why?
I think that not only because I'm Swede myself, but I think that the Swedes are pretty early to jump on and try new things. So I think you can get a lot of learnings by launching in Sweden. So I think Sweden is a good candidate. Early adopters to a lot of things, not very loyal to existing brands. So try out Sweden.
Yeah, and in terms of the other question there, if do all companies need a 10+ year journey to cover many countries? And I think from Pontus and my perspective, when we meet lots of startups now, and that is definitely not true. We see quite many companies that scale out to country number 2 and 3 in the first 2-3 years. So that's we see that quite often as well. So it's not like you have
many
to have
who start, and some of them that start global from the start as well, and don't think about any country at all. Yeah, so, definitely.
So guys, the time is up, and we still have 2 questions, but we will answer them by typing the answers in the Q&A.
Yeah. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Schibsted. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Johan, and everybody involved for putting this together. Thank you to everyone who participated as attendees and for all your great questions and everything. If you have any feedback for us at Moderator1, feel free to tweet at us, send us LinkedIn messages. If you're part of the community already, send us a Slack message. Just let us know what you thought, what kind of sessions you'd like to see in the future as well. We want to provide the kind of best contents that provide the best insights in that sense. And I think, we've done a very good job of that today here. Again, this session was recorded. So if there's an element that you'd like to see again or something you'd like to hear again, we'll be sharing that in the near future. And yeah, just let us know. Same goes for Schibsted and everybody else here. I'm sure you can just reach out to them and ask your questions. If you have anything that comes to mind later on, just feel free. A shot in the dark, it might get you additional great insights, additional to what we got here today. And so I think that's pretty much it, right?
For having us.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure.